Hi everyone, hope you guys are doing well today. If you'll remember in our last lecture, we talked about ethics and public speaking. We also talked about ethical listening in conjunction with being good listeners as well. Ask yourself if you think that you're a good listener. I think most of us would agree that we actually need to be better listeners. Not listening doesn't mean we don't hear. There's actually a component of listening that includes hearing. And hearing is a physiological process involving the vibration of sound waves on our eardrums and the firing of electrochemical impulses from the inner ear to the central auditory system of the brain. But listening involves paying close attention to and making sense of what you hear. Even when we think we're listening carefully, we usually only grasp about 50% of what we hear. And after 24 hours, we can only remember about 10% of the original message. It's little wonder then that listening has actually been called a lost art. Why would you say that listening is important to you? Is it important to you at work, at school, in your relationships? If you think about it, the best business executives, the most successful politicians, the most brilliant teachers are usually good or excellent listeners. So much of what they do depends on absorbing information that is given verbally and doing so quickly and accurately. Additionally, if you want to be a good student, it revolves around listening. So learning how to be good listeners can be beneficial to you as students who spend a large majority of your time listening in the college classroom. Most class time in U.S. colleges and universities is spent listening to discussions and lectures, and a number of studies have shown a strong correlation between listening and academic success. It is also important to you in your relationships. The number one reason people seek counseling is because he or she doesn't listen to me. It's also important to you as a speaker because you can learn so much from other people's speeches and how to be a better public speaker. A side benefit of this public speaking class is that it offers an ideal opportunity to work on the art of listening. During the roughly 90% of the time that you're not speaking, you have nothing else to do but listen and learn. If you think about it, you'll only be speaking in this class for about 20 minutes all semester. One of the ways that listening can serve you is by enhancing your listening skills as a critical thinker. And we're going to talk about listening and critical thinking as well. There are 4 types of listening: appreciative, empathetic, comprehensive, and critical. Appreciative listening is listening for pleasure or enjoyment, such as when you listen to music, or a comedy routine, or an entertaining speech. Empathetic listening might be the type of listening that you would do if you go into the psychology field and you're a therapist or a teacher. We sometimes do this with our very close friends, in which we listen to provide emotional support for the speaker. Comprehensive listening is what you do a lot of times in the classroom, where you listen to understand the message of a speaker, such as when you're looking to find directions to a friend's house as well. Critical listening is what we'll do the most of in this class, where you'll be listening to evaluate a message for purposes of accepting or rejecting it. And as you listen to a sales pitch of a car salesman or another type of salesman, or perhaps even the campaign speech of a political candidate. Although the 4 types of listening are all important, this chapter deals primarily with comprehensive listening and critical listening, which is what we'll be doing in class. They're the type of listening that happens when we'll be listening to speeches, taking lecture notes, communicating at work, and so on. When you engage in comprehensive or critical listening, you must use your mind as well as your ears. When your mind is not actively involved, you may be hearing, but you're not actually listening. And how many times have you said to someone, I heard you? Does that necessarily mean that you were listening? There are 4 main causes that your book lists for not listening that well. And in our defense, we're pretty distractive and our brain works pretty efficiently. So we think that we can do more than one thing at a time. Have you ever thought that you could multitask? Most of us think we can listen to someone else and do something else at the same time, but we really can't. Sometimes we're just not paying attention. We've got other things going on in our head. We're distracted. Our phone notifications are going off. Our phone is ringing. There's stuff in the background. And it's not like we mean to lose track of what's going on, but sometimes our thoughts wander. Have you ever tried to listen too hard? Perhaps you have listened to your anatomy and physiology professor or your physics professor and you feel like you have to write down every single little thing that they say. Quite often, then we're listening too hard and we lose track of the main points and the evidence. Have you ever jumped to conclusions in which you thought that you already knew what someone was going to say? And sometimes that's when we hear what we want to hear, not really what that other person is saying. Nearly every speech has something to offer you, whether it be information, point of view, or technique. You're cheating yourself if you happen to prejudge or choose not to listen. Often we also focus on delivering appearance. Sometimes we judge people by the way they look or speak and don't listen to what they have to say. It's important that we not be sidetracked by this type of interference, and it's something that we always need to guard against. So your textbook talks about what is called spare brain time, which essentially means we can talk at a rate of 120 to 150 words a minute, but your brain can actually process 400 to 800 words a minute. This would seem to make listening easy, but it actually has the opposite effect because you have plenty of time in your brain to do all kinds of other things at the same time. So, how do you become a better listener? And the first step toward becoming a better listener is to afford it the seriousness it deserves. Good listeners aren't born that way. You also will not wake up tomorrow after having listened to this lecture and be a good listener. You have to work at it, and you have to work at it consistently, and you have to work at it actively. Good listening does not go hand in hand with intelligence, with education, or with social standing. Like any other skill, you have to work at it. So it's something that you can do by becoming an active listener and taking listening seriously. A lot of times what we do is we passively listen. We feel like we can put our feet up and kick back. Active listeners are not passively listening. They're giving their undivided attention to the speaker in a genuine effort to understand their point of view. In the conversation, they don't interrupt the speaker, they don't finish their sentences. When listening to a speech, they don't allow themselves to be distracted by any type of noise, and they don't prejudge the speaker. There are a number of steps you can take to improve your skills to be an active listener. These include resisting distractions, not allowing yourself to be diverted by a speaker's appearance or delivery, and suspending judgment until you've heard them out, and also focusing on note-taking skills. So, focus or resist distractions. In an ideal world, we could eliminate all physical and mental distractions, but there are things that you have control over. Make sure that your phone is turned to silent and face down on your desk. Make sure you're not doing something else in your brain at the same time that you're listening. Also, suspend judgment. Sometimes someone will come up and say, hey, I'm going to give this speech on the particular topic. My topic's snowboarding. And you're like, oh, well, I know everything there is to know about snowboarding. I don't need to learn anything new. I'm just going to sit back. Suspend your judgment. It doesn't necessarily mean that you know what they're going to say. Doesn't mean that you have to agree with everything that you hear, but hear people out before reaching a final judgment. Try to understand their point of view, listen to their ideas, and then make up your mind. The aim of active listening is to set aside your own prejudices, frames of reference, and desires so as to experience as far as possible from the speaker's world from the inside. You can also focus your listening. You can listen for main points. You can listen for evidence. You can listen for technique. One of the things you'll be doing is critiquing your classmates' speeches. So listen for what their main points are. Unless a speaker is terribly scatterbrained, you should be able to detect what it is that they have for their main points. And a lot of times they'll give that to you in a thesis statement. Listen to their evidence. Think about if their evidence is accurate, if it's objective or comes from sources that are objective. Is it relevant? And is it sufficient enough to support their points? A lot of times by listening to evidence, it helps us to deconstruct the speeches. Listen for technique. Listen to their delivery. Listen to their introduction, and if they've done their introduction well. Listen to their language. Have they used language that is clear and vivid and appropriate? And focus on their strengths and weaknesses. This will help you to enhance your speech as well by learning from their good points and their bad points. Overall, most people are pretty poor listeners. When we think we're listening carefully, we usually only grasp only about half of what we hear and we retain less. Improving your listening skills can be very helpful to you in your everyday life, including in this speech class. It's important to become a good listener as a critical listener as well in the modern world. And by practicing this important skill, you can become a much better listener.